Morning. So, in an attempt to try to make a brief review of a film I particularly enjoyed, try to get a little immersion in the environment going. It's a very nice foggy day down here in Galveston Beach. And I wanted to talk about Robert Eggers' film, The Lighthouse, starring Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. And a review of the movie itself, I think, is better explained by more professional creative writers on Blu-ray.com. Very nice review on there. And I learned quite a few things from reading that, and I saw a review on Collider. Gave me a few details that I didn't catch when watching the film. And I know a lot of people were confused by the ending in particular, but all throughout the film, there's very distinct imagery, I'll say. The film is shot in pretty much a square aspect ratio. I think it's 1.20 to 1, I believe. And so it gives the film a very old, early film vibe, which the moment it popped up on the screen when I saw it at the movie theater, I just had this big grin on my face thinking, yes, this is what an old black and white looking film should be. And not only that, it was shot with old film stock, shot in black and white, and the levels of gray, very good in the film. But anyway, getting back to the perspective of a fan of old black and white films, the cinematographer, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Jaron Blaschke, as they shot on an island on Nova Scotia, way up north, to give it that nice feel. He selected some really odd lenses that haven't been used in a very long time. In particular, a lens from 1905 with a few shots, and a lens that was designed in 1930. So all these factors contribute to giving the film that old style. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe play two lighthouse keepers, or wickies, as they used to call them. And I read or I heard that in preparing for the film, Eggers found this could have been up in Nova Scotia, where there were lighthouse keepers and keeping journals and accounts of their activities and possibly conversations that they had with each other, and the patterns of speech, the way they wrote, possibly the way they spoke to each other back then, that was incorporated into the dialogue between the two. And I can understand many people were thrown off by Willem Dafoe's accent for the film. They found it a little hard to understand. I didn't particularly, but maybe because I've heard it enough times before. The dialect that Robert Pattinson was using, there were a couple of times where I thought it went from one region to another, sort of England to maybe Welsh. I'm not sure on that, but it didn't take away from the film at all. It just made me more curious to find out what it was. Now, much of the imagery in the film is like a painting, and translator Mickey Knox, who worked on the Fistful of Dollars trilogy, the spaghetti westerns made by Sergio Leone, he said a good director knows his paintings, knows famous paintings, and how the shots were framed. Almost every scene, which there's some pretty long takes in this, which from a theatrical performance standpoint was fantastic. And they're framed like paintings and lit as such. And some outside scenes are a muddled gray, some of the inside scenes. I think as the film goes on and there's more conflict between the two characters, becomes a starker, more contrasting black and white. To get in to the juicy bits of the acting itself, both actors, Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, fantastic performances. I saw that they were not nominated for the Oscars for their performances. I kind of expected as much, but it's a little disappointing that they weren't, because it was a lot better than some of the other movies I saw last year. As many others have said, there are many different elements, horror, thriller, fantasy, someone even said science fiction, which I don't disagree with. As both characters are descending a little more into madness and insanity, particularly Pattinson, and I don't know if I should give anything away or not, which I hope people would have seen the film already. If not, I think giving something away would just put a good idea in someone's head of what to look for and what to pay attention to in case they're confused. And as one of the reviews was saying, that it didn't click in my head when I first saw the film, and I was lost to the ending myself. I'm like, okay, the seagulls are eating his body. What does that mean? I'm not sure, but it didn't make me walk away saying, oh, that was a terrible film, not wrapped up with a nice little bow. It made me want to watch it again and find out more, like, why is this way? And what made it a lot clearer in my head when someone pointed out that it's a similarity and picture to the Greek mythical characters of Prometheus and Proteus, the early old man of the sea and trickster trying to steal fire from the gods. And I thought, okay, that makes sense at the end. Pattinson, he finally ascends to the top of the lighthouse and he sees the light, and it's just so overwhelming, and he falls back down and essentially dies. But cutting from one shot to the next at the very end, I think that's what made it a little confusing. But knowing that it can relate to Greek mythology, I thought, okay, cool. Anytime there's an allusion to Greek mythology, I'm all for it, because it's history. We love history, especially history that has anything to do with the sea. Now, also, from that, the interior scenes where they're just conversing and having just really good, meaty dialogue in the night scenes, I'm just listening not so much to the accents, because it's sunk in by then, but the words themselves and the length of these monologues that they go at. And I personally loved it. I thought this needs to be adapted into a stage play, because I think The Lighthouse could be a very good two-man show. And doing a little more research the other day, I saw that there was a play and story called Thunder Rock, which apparently was written in about the late 1930s, 1939, about two lighthouse keepers, or one lighthouse keeper and a merchant. One wanting to be alone, one wanting to go out and do good for the world. And it was a big hit in London, but it failed miserably in America, I think on Broadway, because in 1939 we were still an isolationist country right before the war. I hope you young folks remember the war, it was in all the papers. But then I believe it was adapted into a British film in 1942 with, I think it was Michael Redgrave. So hopefully, if that stage play, Thunder Rock, still exists, I hope I can find it. I think that was my biggest takeaway from it, that I would like to see that done, or do it, personally, on stage. So that is a filmmaking fan and actor's perspective. Now, we have less than an hour to enjoy the rest of the fog on the island. So I'd like to thank you for your time and listening to my 2 cents on what could be a brief actor's review for the film. And now, the excellent, and I will see ya in the next one. I'm going to go walk into the water now. This is fate.